Hi guys, so it's Hannah here, SinginHinn. Hopefully you can see from the background I'm somewhere different, and this is part of the August series of really more musical journeys and chatting to some of my lovely friends about their musical journeys. And I'm trying to choose some of the musos who each have a slightly different journey, because what I'm wanting to show you is that we've all come at it from different directions and yet we're all here, and that's what's so important to me. So this time we're chatting to one of my wonderful friends, Malcolm, and I will swap the camera over in a minute and we'll have that conversation. So stay tuned, keep watching. Malcolm's on his way. So Malcolm, hello. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you.
And it's really weird being behind a camera, because normally I'm sitting beside you, or even better, behind you, as you're the person talking to the audience and I'm one of the musos at the back trying to keep a straight face.
They can't see your face, so no, they can't.
No. For once. So yeah, as I've just said, you know, I've been wanting lots of different people who've got different musical journeys, and what I'm interested in is that I actually don't know a lot of your journey. You know, you've intimated things in the past, but I've never put it together. And actually, when I interviewed Joanne, who you also know, and we've also played it on stage as a group together many times, the three of us, with other musos. And when I interviewed her, there was part of her story I realised I didn't know. So, and that's what's so wonderful about these as well, that I learn more. So, tell me, how did your musical journey begin? Where did your musical journey begin?
Right. Before I do that,
Yup.
I gave this a little bit of thought, and once upon a time I did some media training, and the media training basically was, you really need to get what you're going to say down to 3 things, no more than 3 things, and try as I might, I can't do that.
I was going to say, well, I'm knackered.
So, ignoring that fact, where does the music journey begin? I suspect it begins when I lived in Northumbrian, and my mother made me and my brother have piano lessons.
How old were you then?
6.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit younger. I think I was 6. Might have been 7. My brother might have been 5. And we had music lessons, piano lessons, and we hated it. There was no discussion beforehand about having piano lessons. My parents weren't particularly musical, or so I thought. And it was like there's nobody in the family played a musical instrument, and we had piano lessons and we hated it, and we kept expressing this: we don't like piano lessons, don't like it. Playing tunes that I didn't like, had no connection to.
What was it, classical?
No, it was volume 1, Michael rowed the boat, row the boat.
Oh my lord.
Sure. Yeah, you can picture it. We're talking about early 60s, 60s-ish.
Yeah.
And I just hated it. And we had this long conversation with my mother about how we didn't want to come. We had to come home, have the lessons. We never practiced because we didn't enjoy it, and that would just prolong the agony. And after, I suspect, it seems like many years, but I suspect it was probably 1, maybe 1.5, the music teacher, who was kind of, in retrospect, quite a nice person, but we didn't have a lot in common with basically music or pianos. And after telling our mother several times that we didn't want to have piano lessons anymore and being ignored, my brother and me got an axe and a hammer, and we took the piano to bits. Literally to bits. The bits that we could break, we broke. The ones that we couldn't, we didn't, and we stacked this piano in bits in the front room. My mother went ballistic. Kind of like I was surprised. Because she didn't seem to have any attachment to the piano either, but obviously she'd bought it. And anyway, the good part about all of that is that was the end of piano lessons. My father managed to salvage one of the panels from the piano and made a coffee table with it, which kind of haunted me till I left home.
I thought you were going to say she made you have joinery lessons after that.
No. Joinery would have made more sense because my father's grandfather, my great grandfather, was the joiner, heading on the wall, joiner, undertaker, coffin maker, and wheelwright.
Oh my lord! All in one.
All at once. So it kind of like joinery would have made more sense than piano lessons.
Yeah.
So we destroyed the piano, and it put an end to the piano lessons. In retrospect, I felt quite sad that I'd been forced into music when I wasn't ready for it.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was like later, I would have desperately liked to have had a closer connection with music. So following on from that, sort of the next connection with music was when I was at junior school in Northumbrian. They did a Easter, I suppose you'd call it Passion, Easter play.
Yeah.
It's Easter, so it's not a nativity. So
Anyway, going to be Passion, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole village, I mean, literally the whole village was involved in this. And because we had recorder lessons at school, I guess the term beforehand involved everybody learning the same tune on recorders. And I have this vivid recollection of performing in the church in Ovington, St Mary's, St Mary's. The church, as an aside, where Thomas Bewick drawed on the flagstones. So every time we went into this church, it's like, oh, Thomas Bewick practices drawing here on these flagstones. So it's quite, that comes back later in my life to be a connection, but at the time it was. And me and my best mate, Thomas Davidson, Thomas, we were mucking around getting ready for the performances, and we managed to rip the sleeves off the costumes we were wearing. So I was the only person in that Easter Passion with short-sleeved Arab, I don't know what you call it, gilet type thing.
Yeah.
And because I had no sleeves, I also had to have my arms tanned. So everybody else had faces tanned, I had arms tanned as well and darkened. So that was 11.
11, right.
11. So I left junior school, didn't do anything musically as far as I remember when I went to Wall Bottle.
So was the Passion, that was recorders?
Yeah, I was playing recorders, yeah, walking and playing recorder up the aisle of St Mary's. And I kind of think that was my first public performance of any kind.
Wow.
Yeah, along with everybody else, so it wasn't like a person. That's quite, I suppose. It didn't feel significant at the time because everybody was doing it. And it's like, not everybody does this, don't it? And it's amazing how you grow up with these things that, because everybody does it, it's normal, therefore you do it.
Yeah.
And it was only later that it didn't seem quite so normal.
Yeah.
Went to Wall Bottle School, didn't do music at Wall Bottle School, and in 1968, when I was 14, I moved to Essex and had music. It was a third year. Or was it the fourth year?
It was a wood pigeon. Okay.
Yeah. We had to choose options, and one of the options was drama or music.
How old were you at this point, sorry?
14, I think.
Oh, right, yes, I think
it was 68. I can't remember what 68. 68 was when I went to Essex. 69, it may have been 69, we had to do the options. But I suspect it was September 68, actually. So we go into the music lesson, and I had no experience of music at all. And
other than breaking up a piano.
Rather than destroying instruments.
Musical deconstruction, let's call it.
Yeah, and playing the recorder. And went into music lessons and wanted to learn to play the saxophone because I always loved the sound of the saxophone. And the music teacher, Mr. Cole, known as Old King Cole, King Cole was a medieval icon of northeast Essex, right, and the King Cole pub was down the road, and so he was known as Old King Cole. And asked if I could play a saxophone, and he said, "No, don't have saxophones. Flute's like a saxophone." And I'm going, "No, it's not." And it's like, "No, it's not." But I suppose I could learn. Maybe it is like a saxophone. So I had a flute which I shared with a guy called Martin Lamb, who was a year younger than me, and it wasn't like a saxophone. No matter how you look at it, the fingering was like, I mean, first of all, it's up here.
I was going to say, it doesn't have a reed from what I remember.
Yeah. So, and it was all wrong, and I should have just packed it in. And then Martin, who I shared this with, sat on it, on a chair. and that,
musical deconstruction is
again,
the theme.
Yeah. So he had it, and then I didn't get the practice with it all at all for weeks, months maybe, and that was the end of that kind of connection with an instrument.
So how long had you been having flute lessons and playing flute?
I don't know, less than a year.
Right, okay. Not enough
2 terms.
to bond with it, and not enough to really remember that much, other than
No.
I did play it for a little bit.
I did play it for a little
A
bit.
bit like me in the euphonium.
Yeah, well, it could be the story of my life, things I did for a little bit. And but Mr. Cole and me had a big bust out, because 68 was an important year in education, and there were big changes happening in society, and people tend to think of the big ones, the riots in Paris with Danny the Red, Danny Bannock-Cohen, or the occupation of Warwick University by the students to basically look at the files which contained all kinds of opinionated comments by teachers which didn't reflect well on their students, and there was a lot of big things happening in '68, but there were changes in our school, and the only reason I'd gone to the school in Essex, I'd chosen it because the headmaster was going to convert it from a grammar school to a comprehensive. There was a move to comprehensive schools and education. I thought that was a good thing. Really wanted to be involved with all groups of society, not just.
Can you explain to us very briefly the difference between a grammar and a comprehensive for those of us who, because there are people, I'd like to think, over the world who watch this as well, but also because more modern exchange as well.
Final year in junior school, which is age 10, 11, up at top end of 10, maybe 11, you sat an examination in your junior school called the 11 plus, and depending on how well you did in that exam, depended on which school you would go to afterwards. It was selective. It was picking at the very best the top 20%, the so-called top 20%, and that's what happened to me. I sat the 11 plus. I'd always been 4th in the class, and the year that I sat 11 plus, I was 3rd, and the top 3 from our school went through.
To the grammar school?
To the grammar school.
What happened to the rest?
Walpole. They went to the local comprehensive. Oh no, it wasn't in the comprehensive, it was a secondary modern. So they went across the river at Ovingem up the hill to Pridda, where they went to the secondary modern school at Pridda. And the nearest grammar school for me in Northumberland was Walpole Grammar School.
So basically grammar schools were seen as a better not quality of student, but the brighter students who were reflected well on exams.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of changes happening. Some of them were kind of positive, so that Walpole itself was a campus of 3 schools. They had the grammar school, which was basically the top 20%, and that was for people who were probably going to go into university or kind of civil servants, kind of the professions, and that was definitely seen as the case. Then you also had technical schools, and Walpole East was a technical school, I think, and the technical schools were to prepare pupils to take up apprenticeships, often with a male emphasis, but not exclusively. So those were for people who would be going into trades, telecoms, joinery, the whole list of apprenticeships, really, old-fashioned apprenticeships, but it would bypass the apprenticeships, so you'd get qualifications which would help you make better hands-on crafts people.
Yeah.
And secondary modern were for everybody else, basically, kind of people who would do more menial tasks. and I think that kind of summarises it.
Mm.
And the selective education system favoured 20%, and most places disfavoured, if that's a word, 80%.
Yeah.
So I'd gone to Walbottle, can't remember doing music, did very little art, did no drama. It was mainly the academic subjects. That was it. So in '68 I moved to Essex, and at this period, this time of technical schools were a new development, campuses working together were a new development, and there were changes in the way that people were being taught. I'd done Nuffield education, so we'd done modern maths, modern sciences, computers and physics, chemistry and physics, and that was a test run in Northumberland which was going to be rolled out across the country. So it was a time of big change, and part of this big change was the music teacher, Mr. Cole. And Mr. Cole said that what they were going to do every 4 weeks, that we would study, 1 week we'd study music, kind of study music. 1 week we would do music, so we would sing as a group, we would learn a song. 1 week the class could pick a tune to review in class, and 1 week he would pick a piece of music that the class would review, which seems kind of it was progressive, let's be under absolute no, that was very progressive. This went on for about 3 weeks, and I suddenly realised that in order for every pupil in the class, let's say there were 30 people, that would be 30 months of teaching. And it's like you're talking about 4 weeks, 12 weeks, so you're like maybe 4 or 5 a year. So it would take probably 6 years for all of us to get our choice. Yeah. And I pointed out that that wasn't really fair, because for us getting one choice, he got one choice. Yeah. And so that in the time that we'd all got a chance, i.e. 30 cycles of this program, he would have had all of his choices 30 times. And at that stage I was kicked out of music. Just because I disagreed with the structure of the syllabus.
It's rubbish, isn't it? I mean, that's like, shouldn't you be just given praise for your statistics?
Well, there was the school had previously been a very traditional grammar school, and some of those teachers weren't used to being questioning.
Right, yes.
I was in my 4th year, so I just started GCSE programme, and GCE as it was then. Just started that programme, but we had some options which we had to choose some options, and one of the options was music or drama. But I also ran in with the English teacher because I was quite good at reading, even though I
English reading, yeah.
And always had problems with dyslexia.
Right.
Spelling, I'm still a hopeless speller. But the English teacher, I was spotted as being a keen reader, and I'd read an awful lot of books. Basically, I'd read every book in the school, in the junior school in Northumbrian before I left, including the ones the head teacher kept for rainy days, because he had rainy days, he had books. But by the time I'd finished, I'd read them as well. One of which was the Viking stories.
Oh, right, yeah.
And anyway, so I'm in this top stream in a grammar school English group, and we're going to take our O-level a year early.
Wow, that's right.
That was the plan. And it was going quite well. We had topics we could pick. I picked Russian literature, so at I'd be 15, I think. Great. 15. So I was reading Turgenev, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chekhov, Gogol,
very keen.
And it was 15.
Reading and understanding.
Yeah. And Gogol was the best one. The Government Inspector by Gogol, which is a kind of a play, but it's a really good, fantastic story. Very short, very easy to understand. So it was great. The rest of the people in the group were like me, different but similar.
Yes, similar sort of things. Yeah.
And then one day in English, the English teacher asked the group he read us a poem, The Thought Fox by Ted Hughes. And he asked what people thought about it. And I was foolish enough to believe that he wanted to know what we thought about it. And I thought, and I still think, it's rubbish. It's an allegory. Allegory?
Allegory.
It is an allegory.
Yeah.
So he had a page in front of him, and as he thought about the poem, he writes down his thoughts, and he sees the ink tracing the steps of a fox across a snowfield. And I thought, oh, shit. And I still think it's very cheap. And the guy sat next to us, a guy called David Shepherd, the English teacher, Mr. Jones, looked at me and said, oh, David, what do you think? Do you agree with Craven? And David said, well, why do you think he wrote it, David? And David goes, he's poet laureate, isn't he? Yes, that's right. English teacher looking pleased. David says, if he's poet laureate, he probably wrote it for the money. And that was us kicked out of English as well. Out. You know, got kicked out of English, got kicked out of music, and the music choice was, you can go and see Mrs. Allison. She does drama. Well, I'd never done drama. I was very much an unreconstructed Geordie lad, and thought that only puffs did drama, basically. That was what I thought. That was what was in my head about drama, which is why I didn't choose it. And there was another lad who finished up in drama against his wishes. Mackenzie, just known as Mac, and he was from Glasgow. And there was the two of us, strangers in a strange land in northeast Essex, him with a Glaswegian accent, me with a Geordie accent, doing drama. And in some ways that was the best thing that happened to me. Sheila basically saw I was unhappy, said, why are you unhappy? I said, people don't understand me. She said, well, all you've got to do is talk slower. You don't have to lose your accent, you don't have to deny who you are.
Yay.
To fit in. You
How
just got
wonderful to hear that.
So she was great.
Spot on.
That was really good, and she was an inspiration to drama, and Mac and me just did so much together in the drama, in the class, and then in the school drama performances, and it was really good. So that's kind of music slipping into drama, and I think that'll probably slip back in later on as well. So that was kind of school, my experience at school with music. Wouldn't say it was brilliant. Didn't come away with any kind of knowledge of how we explain the historic development of musical styles or any of that, and went off to college to study drama and geography.
Lovely.
It was at Huddersfield Polytechnic. Huddersfield Polytechnic was one of 3 external colleges to London University who had music degrees back in the day. Colchester was one, Northeast Essex. I think Goldsmiths was a second, but I might be wrong, and the third was Huddersfield Poly. And in my first year I was in the Hall of Residence. I met a guy called Chris Shields, who was appalled at how little I knew about music. Because basically, if anybody mentioned music, it was just, oh, that's classical. And it was like, it didn't matter whether it was Baroque, classical, romantic, 20th century or modern. It was just classical to me. And he was just appalled. I mean, seriously appalled at my lack of knowledge. And basically once a week, my recollection is a bit hazy now, we were now talking 50 years ago. Bit hazy, but once a week we would have a music lesson, listening to music over a couple of beers, and he would encourage me to reflect on the difference between the different styles. Very simple introduction.
And this was just an understanding between you as mates.
Sitting
down saying, I'm going to teach you music because it's offending me how little you know.
And you're going to be a junior school teacher. You need to know this, Malcolm. You need to know this for your own benefit. And so for a year, I suspect it was less than that, Chris would kind of play bits of Baroque, bits of classical, bits of romantic. and we'd play it and we'd be drinking a couple of beers. It was very civilised. I mean, this is how music should be taught, really, over a couple of beers.
I can see a lot of 6-year-olds now with the special brew, and I'm thinking it's probably not the best.
No, but for anybody over the age of 18, or in fact anybody over the age of 16, because you can drink as well, it's very, very recommended. You get a learned musician. I can't even remember what instrument he played, but he was quite good for me. The only downside to that kind of teaching me Baroque, classical, romantic, 20th century and modern, distinguishing a bit there, but was that I thought that, because of that was how he explained it to me, that meant that music was getting better as you came up to the present. So that old music wasn't very good because it was old, and that modern music was better because it was modern. And that was a misconception I carried until about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And it was a conversation I had with a friend of ours, mutual friend, Francis Wood. Going, isn't Telemann good? Oh yeah, he's really good. You know, I used to think that Baroque stuff was rubbish because it was superseded by classical. Doesn't mean it's better, it just means it's superseded it, and I'd never occurred that things can supersede which aren't better than. I now understand that so much better. So at college, there was Chris Shield who taught me that, and that was about all that I had to do with music.
So what age are we at now then?
We're at 21, 22.
So now you feel a bit more confident with your Renaissance, Baroque, classical, whatever the hell they're called.
Yeah, but still again, people challenging us about what's proper music and what isn't.
Oh, you're always going to get that.
Yeah. So, and my first wife, Anne, we got married and we had a church wedding, and we were discussing the music and what you'd have, and I'd always found Amazing Grace a very uplifting tune. And her father said, it's not suitable for a wedding, so we didn't have it. And it's like, and it was like, I wish so much now that I'd said, yes, it's suitable. But he was a church, played the piano, organ in the church, played piano. He was a junior school headmaster, and very difficult to argue with people like that. I hadn't learnt my lesson. And so that just sticks out as one example of what is legitimate and what isn't legitimate music.
But that's it, isn't it? It's that idea that because somebody should have more experience of being in contact with music, that makes their knowledge more relevant and more right. And I'm not sure that's true,
No,
is it?
Not at all.
Because it's very much about that was just his opinion.
Yeah. And his opinion was based on all of the weddings that he'd been to, and I'd never been to a wedding.
And that's it. And it's like, his musical knowledge might have been greater in terms of the background, but that's not to be confused with opinion and taste, is it? Yeah,
and it was really strange because he also played the pub on a Friday night session that took the front of the piano off, and he played honky-tonk piano in the pub in the village. It's a bizarre collection of skills. But I think there was an awful lot of people, especially men, but not exclusively, who during and just after the Second World War had a completely different life experience and had gone on to whatever they did, and he was musically inclined and was a teacher, and that to him it wouldn't make any difference. He played piano at the pub on a Friday night, he played the organ in the church on a Sunday. That's what people did. Well, some people obviously, some people didn't do any of that. But
I suppose it's a bit like you were saying about the joiner back in Ovington, was the joiner, the coffin maker, the wheelwright. So it is still of that era where...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Alan, my father-in-law, he had an album called Folk on Two, which was quite significant because Folk on Two did a Northumbrian album in 1966, I think it was, or 68, that kind of period, and it was a collection of music. And I found this in his collection and played it, and that was the first time I could remember hearing Northumbrian pipes.
Oh right, did he play Northumbrian?
No, he didn't play pipes.
Right.
But he had this album.
He owned an album. He didn't make an right.
Yeah.
I'm with
And
you.
the album was it predominantly wasn't music in the sense of instrumental music. There was storytelling. There was I think it was a life. It's anyway. I can check this, but there was a way, a mnemonic for remembering the heads on the headlands north of Whitby to Berwick. So it was just somebody repeating this like not a poem, not a mnemonic, but it was a way of remembering how each headland came into view.
Yeah.
There was a what do you call them? Kazoo band, marching bands. There was a kazoo marching band on this album. There was part of Scott. What was his second name? The guy who did Advanced Geordie Palaver, Learn Yourself Geordie. He was a Scott. I can't remember his surname. We had a whole series of little pamphlets to explain Geordie, and one of the stories was about the Roman War, and within this story it explains how they're not really mile castles, they're tab castles, because it takes you one tab to get from one castle to the next on the Roman Wall. And he reckoned that the vallum, the big ditch, was dug to plant leeks. And this is all reconstruction of the Roman history.
And just to put in there, I mean, I don't know if it'll get used or not, but a tab is a cigarette up here.
Yeah. And it is just...
So you found this album?
And I played it. And there was one track on it, Colin Ross playing Chevy Chase.
All right. And when was this? This will be in the early 70s?
It would be 84.
Oh, we're 84s now.
Yeah.
So
there's a big gap.
There's
Left
a big
college.
gap.
Big gap. Big
Did
gap.
other things.
Yeah.
Not really to do with music, just listening to it. Right, okay.
And I can't... there's this thing that happens to the human mind, which is where you go back and reconstruct a history because it makes sense to you to have understood it that way. I think I've always been aware of Northumbrian Small Pipes, but I can't think of an example prior to listening to this album with Colin Ross playing on it. And actually finding that whole album about Northumbrian folk, the identity of Northumbria expressed either as a spoken word or music, and I found that a bit inspiring. And shortly afterwards, I, by accident, and I don't know how, came across Catherine Tickell. Now there's a fighting chance that was either on John Peel or the other guy whose name I forget. Nick Kershaw?
Possibly.
Yeah, because Nick Kershaw played Northumbrian Pipes occasionally on his.
Did he?
Yep, he did.
Right.
And
so this is still in probably the mid or late 80s then?
Early 80s. Definitely early 80s.
Right, sorry. For some reason I was thinking Nick Kershaw was later.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's that kind of weird thing.
To an next,
yeah. So, and they were both at the same time as well for some of it.
Yeah, because Peel, I remember
late.
in my sort of childhood 20s.
Yeah. So, I'd heard the Pipes again, and then somehow I found out that Catherine Tickell was playing at the White Horse in Longside in Manchester, which is about 15 miles away from where I was living. And so went down, me, my wife, and Melanie, my daughter, went down to listen to some Northumbrian pipes being played. And they wouldn't let Melanie into the pub, even though the folk session was upstairs and there wasn't a bar there. And that was to become a common problem, taking Melanie to folk music. I'll come to another thing about that as well. Yeah. So anyway, the agreement that came to is that I would go up for half of the thing, because we'd driven quite a way, and went upstairs to listen to Catherine, who was 18 at the time.
I was going to say, she must have been quite young.
It was her first professional tour, I think, and she was wonderful. And me being the shy Ben that I am, went up to say, I've got to leave now because I couldn't be met. And they've sat downstairs listening because the windows were open, summer, and they've been listening. And she came downstairs and said hello to Melanie and asked her if she enjoyed the music.
Oh, lovely.
Didn't ask me, didn't ask Anne, but spoke to Melanie. And that kindness, because there was no possible advantage to her.
No.
It's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
And that's so we left. I had the first half, and then we left. And the next day, or 2 days, I found out that I had a friend who had another friend who knew Adrian Schofield.
Oh, right, yes.
So I went down to see Adrian Schofield in Bolton.
Play?
No, just
to see him?
Just to say hello, basically.
Right, all right.
I'm interested in pipes, really teachers, basically. Plucked up courage to do it. So I go down to see Adrian in my usual apparel for the time, which is t-shirt, either tatty or otherwise, and shorts, and trainers. And go down, knock on this house door, saying, hello, I've come to see Adrian Schofield. Is this where he lives? Yes. Is he in? No. So, but you can come in. So his mum dragged me into the family house and sits us down, gives us a cup of tea. And then I'm thinking, what am I doing here? What's this all about? You know, I don't know this guy. It's gone from being a casual introduction to say hello to being sat in his living room with his mum making a cup of tea, dressed a bit scruffy, to ask for music lessons. Anyway, Adrian comes in. He'd been somewhere, I don't know where. In tatty pair of shorts, trainers, and a tatty t-shirt. So we're dressed like twins. And it was like, that's kind of weird. And it was like, I gather you teach people Northumbrian Small Pipes. Yeah. And he's very terse, Adrian, at the time. Doesn't commit to anything. Yep. Would you be prepared to give me lessons? Yep. Well, I have to see how you play first before I give you lessons. Okay. Fine. Have you got your pipes with you? No, I haven't. Do I need my own pipes to learn? Yes. But I thought I could borrow yours. Look of thunder, no. But let's see. We can put them on and see if you can get anything out of them. So he straps us into a set of Northumbrian Small Pipes. And I could seal the fingers, seal the drums, and could just about take one finger off at a time. Very first time I touched them.
Fair play.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was impressed. And then I said, well, how do I get a set of pipes? Well, you buy them. And it's kind of this bizarre conversation. But any small piper who's trying to get a set of pipes will appreciate this kind of narrative. You can buy a set. Well, where can I buy a set? Well, David Burley, where can you buy a set? Well, many places. I said, well, where did you get yours from? I said, David Burley in Northumbrian. Okay. How do I get about meeting him or something? And he said, would you like me to talk to him and order your set? Like, yep. Okay, so Adrian arranges for me to go and talk to David about a set of pipes, and I ordered a set. Horrified at the price, absolutely horrified. Like £550, I think they were. And it's like, before you've tried them, you've got to commit.
That's a lot of money to commit, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I understand the argument that all good instruments, or all instruments, are expensive. And if they're cheap, they're probably not any good.
Yeah.
It's not always true, but it certainly was true. So I committed to this and bought my first Burley pipes by not paying an access bill. Just letting it drift for a month and used the money instead of making the payment to buy the pipes, and got the pipes. But even that isn't simple and straightforward. I'd seen David Nat called in another time to see how he's getting on and just remind myself to him. And my name wasn't on the list of people he was making pipes for, because he used to keep a chalkboard at the back of his workshop. And I said, I thought you said it'd be ready in November. My name's not up there, I'm not even on the top 4. So he said, oh, I must have forgotten you. So he got a rubber, rubbed out the top one and wrote my name there. And you think, well, that's okay. Turns out the top one was a woman called Katrina who lived in Chester, who I later played with quite regularly, and she couldn't understand why her name had suddenly gone down the list.
Did you ever tell her?
No.
No.
So yeah, and he wouldn't make me a set with more than 7 keys. Well, why can't I have 11 or 12 keys? Okay, he says, which 12 notes would you like? He said, because if you don't know, I'm not going to make you a set you're not going to play and not be happy with.
Yes.
Come back when you can play 7 keys properly.
Yes.
And decide what you want. And
Yes.
I thought that was incredibly patronising from an instrument maker, which it was. I mean, there's no doubt about it, but it was completely right.
Yeah.
So that's how I finished getting my first set of pipes in about 1986. I can't be sure because I can't read David's handwriting.
Love it.
And that kind of, again, 85, 86 was an important time in my life. I changed jobs and I managed by accident to pick up a responsibility for an adult music class in a day centre in Manchester, because each member of staff, each member of staff had to supervise a number of activities, and at the interview I was asked what I would like to do, and I was quite good at, I was quite numerate, and because I've had dyslexia I appreciated how people didn't learn. I was into photography, I was into cycling, so I finished up with maths, supervising the adult maths sessions, photography, supervising the photograph sessions, running a bike workshop, how to fix bikes, keep them on the road, and I also got Monday night music. And I didn't really know anything about Monday night music in the era since 1985, but it was quite a nice place to be, and eventually some of the volunteers helped me understand music, and that was important, and we kind of just totted along. We used to do a Christmas concert internally for the students at this day centre, primarily for adults with who had problems with literacy and numeracy, but also offenders, people with mental health problems, drug problems, homeless. It's a huge group of people in Manchester, and we went from running one music concert on a Christmas to running 2, to running 3. So every term we would have an end of term music class, and largely because I was quite happy to put the time and enthusiasm in, if not the musical ability.
Okay, so where were we at? 1980,
mid-86, started work at Nevis in Manchester.
Right.
We were doing end of term concerts, 3 a year. I was played for all of the concerts basically, which was a good opportunity to play with various people. I had lots of really talented volunteers in who helped the adults mainly learn guitar, but we did guitar, drumming, and when we could other musical lessons to support them. We learned a lot about how adults learn music basically. So I did it for 17 years, and
working at that place.
Running the music basically.
Right.
It's only 1, then 2 sessions, and then we ran external sessions as well, but it was never more than about 4 sessions a week.
So you learned a lot about music in that time from that, as as learning about how students learn.
Oh yes, very much so.
Music.
Yeah, I mean, you find that people were going to music teachers because they wanted to play an instrument, play piano, play anything, and basically most music teachers were set up to teach kids, and so they were doing child appropriate music, which is fine because in general terms children are like a blank sheet of paper, and you can actually start anywhere with that, but we found that a lot of adults weren't like that. They generally wanted to play a tune or a couple of tunes,
and a tune that they recognise and like. As well.
So life is far too short to play tunes you don't like.
Absolutely.
So
my motto.
We had volunteers who would then find music to suit the students, and that went really well. Enjoyed it. I say every Monday night for 17 years. It was a big. I mean, it's getting part of my job. It was fine, but it was quite nice. In years, a couple of other things came along, one of which was the musical tutor, a guy called Mark Stanley, who I'm still close friends with. He got involved in a community play in Salford, and I think it was called The Big Ditch, which was the 100th celebration of the Manchester Ship Canal.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it was being put on the site of what is now Salford Quays. Salford Quays had been cleared. There was very little building going on while the site was done, and the Peeled Holdings had put money into a community play, which was to take place in a multi-storey car park, which again was a fantastic experience. The actors don't move. The audience move. The audience go down the levels of the multi-storey car park.
That's awesome.
Which meant you could set up scenes and leave them set up for the 3 nights of the run without having to change the scene for the next act.
What an incredible...
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
It was really good. And originally I thought I could possibly play pipes, but that wasn't going to be a runner.
How was your piping by then? How long had you been having lessons? And were you still
Adrian helped me, but I didn't have lessons. It soon became apparent that the lessons weren't going to work particularly well for me. But we were friends, and he took me everywhere. I mean, he took me out to one night, he went from Bolton to Skipton because there was supposed to be a session in a pub, and he thought it would be good for me. In the very early days, he made me play my pipes with all 3 drones turned on.
Oh my Lord.
So it was sucking a lot of air.
Yeah,
I sat in the Queen's Arms in Rothbury at a session, and I played my drones for 3.5 hours.
Oh my good God.
Because it would be good for me. No chant, just the drones.
Do you know what? That's like the Karate Kid, wipe on, wipe off.
Yeah. So the lessons weren't formal with Adrian. They were not so organised, but the experience of being with them and seeing other people, and learning from his vast knowledge was really good.
Yeah.
So although I was playing reasonably well, I don't think I've ever been a good piper, and that's not a false modesty. It is, when it comes to music, in order to be good, you need to apply yourself to it, and I have never been good at applying myself to one thing, and it isn't because I only compare myself to the best. I also compare myself to how I was a week ago, a year ago, and so I can play a tune reasonably well. I could play a set reasonably well. I still remember playing the first set that I did that I really enjoyed when we were nearest, and I played long ago, and remember getting every note right in a tune. Every note right. Not sharp, not flat, not short, not long. And the hairs on the back of my neck started to stand up because I was enjoying my own playing. It's an experience I haven't had often, to be fair. And I have also learned since then that actually the tune's not over till it's over, and actually feeling good about it, how it's going, isn't necessarily a good thing. You need to concentrate on it till the end.
Yeah, it's that, wow, I'm playing really well. Oh, I've just dropped off now
Absolutely.
because I just got distracted.
So, but yeah, I mean, in Nearest I was playing reasonably well. There was this community play, I think it was The Big Ditch. I think that's what it was referred to. And there was 3 of us or 4 of us, and had a junk gamelan, which basically was a scaffolding tower about 4 meters high, 3 meters high, and when we started it was just all different things hung off this pole, which you hit, and there were all sorts on there. But it soon became clear that that wasn't going to work. So the items were reworked. So there was a collection of metal items, a town hall board for the car park in Salford. That was there. There was a sheet of 1 metre square shipbuilding steel. There was, what else was there? Bits of metal, all kinds of bits of metal, all with different timbre and
quality.
Yeah, and then we had sheets of plastic, but it was really dense plastic, and bits of wood, bits of timber poles, and effectively there was 3 areas on this gamelan, and the 3 of us just basically played one of the areas, and it wasn't choreographed, and because there was 3 of us, we could either play a similar rhythm to all 3, or the metal and the wood would play a similar rhythm, and the plastic guy would be off doing something else, and it was a really good experience. And the 2 people I'm playing with were both making money out of playing music. That's what their job was. They were professional musicians, and I wasn't, because at no stage was I really getting paid for being a musician. I was getting paid for being an educator, and there is a difference
Yes, I'm with you. Yes.
So that's what we did at the ship canal, and that was quite good. I'm trying to think what else happens there basically. Oh yeah, I organised the Manchester Pipe Days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. In 1990, I think it was 90, it might be in 88, it was that end of the 80s, early 90s. Working in an education centre, you have a resource, have a centre, and at the time there was no pipe course, pipe days anywhere really. Joe Hutton had a pipe weekend which was run in Rothbury. There were other odds and sods, but not organised, and we had a group of pipers in Manchester who played together. There was 2 groups, one played in Manchester and one tended to play in Chester, but there was an overlap between the groups, and the Chester group, which is where I was going, sort of said, well, why don't we play for longer one day, this 2 hours, 7 till 9, 2.5 hours, and it really isn't satisfactory. Why don't we just organise a Saturday somewhere? And because I was in Manchester and had access to an education centre and nobody else was doing anything like it, I said, yeah, we'll do that. So that's what I did, organise the first pipe day in Manchester. And that is still going, touch wood.
Brilliant. Wow, what a legacy.
Yeah, I mean, I left Manchester in 2003, and a couple of times it stuttered a little bit, and Susan and me went down and helped run one of them. But yeah.
Susan being your current wife?
Yes. Yeah. So we organised the first annual pipe day.
That's
it was in Manchester, yeah. And as a consequence of that, Susan, inspired by Manchester, organised one in Oxford. So there was the Oxford annual pipe day, and that has continued. The Pipe Society started organising the pipe day, and that was really quite good. And yeah, met a lot of people. We got a grant from the local authority, because Manchester Local Authority had a fund for world music. So I went and found the organiser of the world music and said that basically the world starts with your own country.
Yeah.
Let's fund Northumbrian Pipe Day.
Yeah.
I can't just give you money. I said, I bet you could. He said, no. I said, how about we'll take up to 3 or 4 young people who would like to come along, and you're basically guaranteeing the price, and as it's going to be about 20 quid, we'll make it 5, and I got 100 quid to support Northumbrian Pipes within the kind of merged curriculum of adult and children in Manchester from the World Music Department.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, things like that don't exist anymore. They're
No.
long gone.
What is this word funding of which you speak?
Yes, yeah. So that was Manchester Pipe Day, and
It was a legacy.
yeah, and we had people coming down to tutor on it. Adrian obviously was one of the first ones. Had eminent tutors. Basically, we tried to rotate them, keep 2 for a couple of years. So we'd have 3, change one of the other one, change. So there was a rotation.
Yeah.
So we got different tutors coming in on the basis of what I learned in the education centre, which was not everybody gets on with the same people, and having a choice of tutors always works.
Yeah.
Nearly always works, rather than always works. And so that was how we sat down and thought about the programme, how we would organise the day, what we would want to do, a combination of the first one we did a recording session which people practiced for, because we had access to a recording desk. Because we had a recording desk, the Northwest Sound Archive came down and recorded it.
Brilliant.
For posterity. We had Adrian and Colin Ross and Pauline Cato doing taught sessions in there.
Wonderful.
And a kind of concert at the end. And it's I still remember, it's like yesterday, and it was, it's 32 years ago, at least 32 years ago. And we learned things like you can't record a group of people who've never recorded before inside 2 1.5-hour sessions. Not possible.
No.
Far too keen. We had problems with sound bouncing off the art room glass. The art room had a lot of glass, but lots of sound bounce off windows.
Very
but
live.
it was definitely a learning experience, and everybody seemed to learn from it and enjoy it. So that was Manchester. That was nearest. In the meantime, I suppose the next thing that happened to me was 2020, I think it was. I went to Skye with a friend of mine from up here, up northeast, Don Brown, and we went for a week's holiday, and we had a week, and there was lots of adverts for the Skye Ceilidh. Now, I am incredibly cynical about some things, and I thought, this is going to be absolute so awful. It will be just, a tourist trap for things, and it turned out to be a really, really fabulous, well put together evening of entertainment. It started on the basis that they were using the Gaelic word Ceilidh.
Yep.
And a Ceilidh just means somewhere where people come together to perform.
Yeah.
It does not mean a dance.
Right.
You can dance, but it doesn't automatically mean dance. And on Skye, the organiser of it basically put together a programme. He had a Highland piper, whose name I've forgotten, but he played for Diane wedding and possible funeral. So
Diane.
Princess of Wales.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry.
Just wanted to check.
Yeah. They had the world champion accordion player, and they had 2 young women who played fiddle and were studying at the Gaelic University in Skye, and they were studying Gaelic music.
Wow.
And there was the guy who ran it, who was obviously an entrepreneur kind of person, and they also had the chief executive, McBain Ferries, who lived on Skye, played his guitar.
Brilliant.
And it was like, this is weird. So we had, in the course of the evening, we had a guitar playing bloke who sang a Scottish tune, don't know what, kind of like the Corries kind of thing. That was great. They had this button accordion player who played a range of Scottish tunes. So he played Strathspey, a reel. He wouldn't do a hornpipe. He'd probably do a lament. And it was great. And he'd do a set of reels, and flat out reels, that are brilliant. And the 2 women fiddlers, violinists, fiddlers, both spoke Gaelic. So they did a couple of Gaelic tunes and some weird mouth singing, they call it. It's just fabulous in Gaelic. Didn't understand a word of what they said, but it was wonderful. They had the Scottish Highland Piper playing Highland pipes. Then he played Scottish Small Pipes. Well, he played them really well. And then the entrepreneur said, we'll do a jukebox. So who would like to ask his name? I don't know what his name was. I was going to say Gordon or Colin, but I could be completely wrong. So everybody's asking Scotland the Brave and kind of popular tunes. And Don, who was with us, says, can he play Dark Isle? And he looked flabbergasted that anybody would Dark Island. And so he played that, and then it's a Highland tune, which isn't particularly popular, but it's a lovely tune.
Right. Okay.
And I asked for Onion Blue because I love it, and there was another one, I can't remember what it was, and he could just at the drop of a hat play these tunes straight off, and
from memory.
Yeah, and it was good. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could organise some kind of Northumbrian evening, which was structured, was targeted at tourists, not locals, because the locals will know the music and they will have different requirements as an audience. And the idea was planted then in my head, and basically, cut a very long story short, met Susan in New Zealand on a trip with Pipers and was talking about this idea, and she'd had an idea that really what we could do with is some structured teaching courses
Of the pipes.
For the pipes, for Northumbrian Small Pipes. And
Susan played Northumbrian pipes.
yeah, sorry, yeah, Susan played
So
Northumbrian Small Pipes.
what sort of period was this then? Was this about the same time as 2000?
Well, 2005 was it? 2000?
All right, so you.
I'd been to Sky in 2000.
Yeah, so sort of fast forward a couple of years, and you're still chewing over that idea.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it might have been 2002. I was in Sky. I moved up to the northeast in 2004.
Right, okay.
In January 2005, I went to New Zealand on a trip that Susan jointly organised with a New Zealand piper called Helen Capes. Susan had organised one 4 years earlier, and I thought, who wants to go to New Zealand? You know, I haven't seen all of Britain yet, and there's so many beautiful things in Britain to see. And then they all came back, and they'd all had a wonderful time, and I thought, you are such a bigot, Craven, you know. So I think I was the first person to say, I want to go on the next trip, please. And on the next trip, that was where I met Susan, got to know Susan, and one evening we were talking about how things could be developed for pipes, bearing in mind that she'd been running the Oxford Pipe Works for 6 or 7 years then. No, more, 10 years, 11 years. I'd been involved in Manchester, and we had other strings to our bows, and we were just talking about it. And there'd been a woman in America called Sheila Bridges who wanted something to happen in the Northeast. And it was really hard because to organise something, because in order to come over from America to Britain, you really wanted to do a week-long course.
Yeah.
So me, Susan, and a couple of other people sat and we talked about it. Sheila was on the course as well, on this pipe tour around New Zealand. So we just chewed it over, and that kind of eventually fell into place as a plan for Susan and myself. And the other couple of people who were involved decided they didn't want to be involved fully, but were happy to offer advice and guidance. And we set up a business plan for Northumbrians and Pipers with 4 strands, one of which was this idea of Northumbrian evenings for tourists. They eventually got called Friendly Neats. Yeah, that's what they got called, and they were kind of a mimic of the 17th, 18th century merry neats, which was where people would come together with the friends and the visitors and would entertain people in Northumberland, West Cumberland, Westmoreland, North Durham. And so it's kind of mimicking that, but also reflecting the history of the music in the Northeast. So that was one thing. We would do some summer concerts of some kind. We would run a week-long course for overseas visitors to Britain to study pipes, and we would do occasional concerts ourselves. Susan would teach, she'd been teaching pipes and clarinet for a while, so we'd also include teaching, one-to-one teaching, and that formed into what became a business plan and the business of Northumbrians and Pipers. And we started the first friendly night, I think, was 2009.
I think it was 2008.
Was it 2008?
I was looking through some of my music and I think it was 2008.
Yeah.
I should say at this point, it's at about that time. Well, I mean, you got married not long, so you obviously, was this business plan sort of before you became an item, or was that after?
2005, met Susan, and we just got on so well together. Neither of us were living in the northeast. Susan was in Northampton, had been in Lancashire. I'd returned home, and we both wanted to return home. And we met on the tour, got together on that tour on New Zealand. We went back for another holiday in 2006. In February 2006, I proposed on the flight over on Valentine's Day, and we got married on Susan's birthday in Blenheim on South Island. And we were all that time discussing and planning, how do we make this business work? How feasible is it to make a living from it? Because there was nobody else doing anything like it.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clear that we wouldn't be able to make enough for one person, for two people. We might make enough for one person, but even that was a bit iffy, so we looked at other things we could do in the way of work. So the end result was we formed Northumbrians and Pipers. So that started then, 2009, and we kind of continued all the way through from, I think 2010 would be the first pipe course held at Whitley Bay, just by happen chance. And we ran that until 2017, I think was the 11th. Was it 11th? 2018 maybe. Then we moved to New Biggin because the person who owned the hotel we were using was selling up. Did New Biggin, and then we did one in the first year of lockdown with COVID. And that was those week-long course in November. And Susan's continued to have one-to-one teaching for people on pipes.
And Northumbrian and Pipers is still an entity?
Yeah, we're still an entity, although the COVID has had a big impact, and also I've been quite poorly, and I'll lose track of the time scale, but about 8 years ago, that would be 2014, about 8 years ago, I got diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, which is an incurable autoimmune disease which makes you weak, best way to describe it. It can be managed by medication, and fortunately mine's medicated quite well. I've had no severe side effects to the medicine, and that's quite good. Then 2 years later I got diagnosed with prostate cancer, had surgery, and 2 years after that I had a relapse and had radiotherapy. So they're big life-changing factors, and that's had an impact on what we could do. We stopped doing the friendly nights basically when my ability to stand up for 2 45-minute sets was put in question. We did it 1 year, but I had a chair next to us, had a set of stairs, and it was getting more and more difficult for me to do it. And because of the way that concept worked, it required the input of everybody there on every single thing, and it was just not working. So that was the end of that.
And this is I'm just going to butt in, because this is the part of music and musicians that perhaps isn't it's almost obvious, but it's not obvious, in that there's different staminas going on. As a musician, there is the stamina of concentration, there is the stamina of standing, there is the stamina of moving whatever muscles it is you are using for your instrument, which can often include holding the weight of, or some of the weight of the instrument. But on top of that, there's a concentration and a knowledge that you are being watched the entire time, and that quite often, depending on your role within that, you have to be in a performance mode, and you have to be holding the audience the entire time, and all of those things actually require a great amount of both physical and mental effort, and a 2-hour set or a 3-hour set can actually be as exhausting as running, you know, a half marathon or something like that. And people might not realise, they might think, well, you've just been sitting down for 2 hours, or you've just been standing for 2 hours on stage. No, there's so much more mental and physical going on underneath that.
One of the side effects of the myasthenia was that you can't control your muscles as well, and so I found that my vision would fail, so I couldn't actually read music. It looks like there's a famous Tom and Jerry cartoon where the dots start moving because they rance across the music, and that's what it's like. The second is that because you can't control your muscles as well, although I could still see the music, I could still read the music, the wrong fingers were coming off, and that was very problematic to start with. You kind of think your body, because your body is letting you down, and that was quite hard to deal with, and that affected how much I could or couldn't do.
It affects your confidence academically as well, in yourself generally.
And I think one of the things with chronic illness is that you, unless it affects your health mentally or your mental well-being, or your mental faculties really, you can remember what you could do. So I can remember what I could do 8, 9, 10 years ago. But with the myasthenia, when that sort of came in, I couldn't do it. I couldn't stand up, and it was undiagnosed, I think, for about 6 months.
It was, I remember that it was just...
I was just tired. But I think the other thing, just kind of moving away from that, because that's still happening, some of the stuff's still happening. Susan's running a pipe session in Northumbrian when
weekly.
Weekly. Well, it's twice weekly now. When COVID happened, we immediately set up a Zoom session, although none of us had any experience of Zoom. And the end result was we set up a Zoom session with as many as, I think, 50 people at one of them.
50.
That's wonderful. Generally it was 30.
Yeah.
And we ran that on a Wednesday afternoon, same time as we've been meeting in Northumbrian.
Yeah.
And that continued through until the beginning of this year as a Zoom session. We then realised that with restrictions lifting, we would want to meet on a Wednesday. So we set up
back in person again.
So we set up a Monday evening Zoom session. Monday evening was a better time from people from abroad because we had a lot of interest from...
So what you were finding with the Zoom is actually people who wouldn't have come to the in-person because they lived a long way away and or in a different country and time zone, would suddenly be coming to your Zoom sessions because it was a time when they could come.
And it was the only place that could get access to listening to
and playing
music
along with.
And playing along with music. So we moved from the Zoom session from a Wednesday to a Monday, 4:30. Is it 4:30?
Yeah, I think it was
4:30 on a Monday night afternoon, evening, for an hour and a half, 4:30 till 6. That's still running. We have people coming from Germany, North America, Canada, United States, Denmark, and all parts of Britain, from as far up as the Orkneys,
wow,
down
fantastic.
to Devon and Cornwall.
Brilliant.
And people from very local who, because they've developed illness or mobility problems, can no longer get the Northumbrian joining as well from their front room, which they otherwise would have
Or
had to
they
give
might
up.
be shielding.
Yep. Oh, definitely. Shielding's a big factor. So we've now got that Zoom session on a Monday, and we have the Northumbrian sessions now a hybrid session. We wait till the village had Wi-Fi in to the hall, and we've now got a combined session,
Which is the hybrid session.
the hybrid session. So there are a group of people there, varies about 15 live, and we have
At the session in
in
Northumbrian. Yeah.
and then we have generally up to about 10 people joining on the session. So the people who join by Zoom can actually see the session. We have a camera set up for the village hall, a camera set up on Susan so they can see Susan playing, and when the group plays, the microphone picks up Susan and the people in the hall.
That's wonderful.
And that's it's quite good.
That's brilliant. I know it's not quite good. That's fantastic. I mean, that's
So
just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that's come out of Zoom, that's come out of COVID, that's such a positive that you're forced to sort of change. I mean, actually, you wouldn't wish COVID and everything that's gone with it, but it's been a wonderful way of pivoting and finding new ways that's actually shown that there was a need for it.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
an interest in it.
Yeah. And the worldwide interest had been building up anyway, because there'd been the tours in New Zealand, which Susan and Helen Capes had organised every 4 years. So, and that was joined by people from all over the world. And that was part of a worldwide interest. We know there's a couple of groups meeting in North America, and there is the Blankheim tour course in Germany, but they're quite desperate. But actually having the Zoom sessions meant anybody can join. There are limitations. You can't tell what the players' pipes sound like in a session.
Because they have to be muted.
Yeah. Unless they lead an event.
But you know, I think having joined in some of those, I think that's wonderful to be able to join in on Zoom. In a way, it's encouraging because you know you can't be heard, which sometimes is actually an encouragement because you want to join along, but it doesn't matter if you fall off the tune, it doesn't matter if you play wrong notes, and it can actually pull you along as a player until you feel comfortable enough to join in a different way or even lead a tune or something, you know, and that there's a lot of positives in that as well.
There certainly are.
And I'm finding, sorry just butting in, but as a singer, I'm finding that there's a lot of people who like the idea of joining in on Zoom so that I'm singing and they're only listening to me sing, but they're joining in on Zoom, which means they are hidden. And they love singing, but they don't want to be heard, so they wouldn't come to an in-person because they don't want somebody to hear them, which is a real shame in a way for me because I want to increase their confidence. However, at the same time, it's wonderful to think that they're singing at a point where they might not always otherwise.
I think one of the advantages that Susan and I have is there's two of us.
Yes.
So we can actually play harmonies of varying degrees of competence by me, but we can do it.
Yes.
And that means that people on Zoom can actually hear three pipes, Susan's, mine, and their own.
Yes.
Which is something I think a lot of people have missed. That hearing other pipes to play along with.
Yes.
So that works quite well. I mean, there are other people using Zoom, but it's been very useful, and we can't see it stopping.
No.
Now we've got there, often because a lot of the people who've had to use Zoom now are old and are still shielding, and for whom to meet would be risky. And that's not going to change. I think old people will get older. And
just people who are ill, and as you say, it's people with chronic illnesses that are never going to go away, that are just managed, which is pretty much the definition of a chronic illness, that, you know, it can only ever be managed. And no matter what age they are, they're going to have to be shielding now. So either for themselves or for somebody else.
So I'd studied with the Open University, and then as I was doing more and more music with Nevis, which I was really enjoying, was really enjoying both the management and the playing, I thought I might like to do something with the OU, and they had a 1 year music course, which was brilliant. And so I actually did this introduction to music, which was at level 2 or level 3, even though it was called an introduction. It was definitely more than just an introduction, but it was designed to take people who couldn't play anything through to up to ready to do a master's, basically.
That's brilliant.
So I picked this course, and it was really good, and I quite enjoyed it, and it was incredibly challenging. And this was, I don't know if I'd mentioned it earlier on, but I was listening to Telemann, and I thought, oh, Telemann's great, isn't it? Francis Wood, Telemann's great. And he said, yeah. He said, I always thought because it was early, it wasn't as good as later music. And it was like, no. And that forced me to rethink about those early lessons in music by Chris Shields at college.
Yeah.
So I did the OU course, and that was just incredibly interesting. I'd severed a tendon on a motorbike ride in New Zealand and couldn't do the exam. I had to have a year's extension to do the exam, but still finishing off pieces of work. There was a bark exercise, you had to finish a piece of bark, and there was a Mozart exercise where you had to write, what was it? Was it a minuet? Yeah, a minuet. And I was very close to kicking this course in, because I just thought, this is really ridiculous. But the tutor said, just show us what you've got, and we'll have a look at it, and I'll help you. And he sent it back. He said, well, one of them's fine. That's going to score 34 out of 50, which is really good. And the second one you might want to revisit, but just look at these things and see why and how you could do that better. And I did that, and that convinced me to continue.
Brilliant.
So that was, and it also helped me understand some of the nuances of Northumbrian pipe music, because the Northumbrian pipes are a modal instrument. They will only play in certain keys. They're a transposing instrument, so you're reading G generally, but you're playing in F or F sharp.
And
a bit. And it was really quite useful to put those into perspective with other music. And that was really good. So I think I did that in 2008, finished in 2008. But that also helped me get another job. When I said that we didn't think the business would support the two of us, I managed to get a job with Streetwise Opera. And Streetwise Opera, as an organisation, ran projects for homeless people to sing. Giving a voice to the homeless was the patch line.
Yeah.
And they wanted someone to offer, I wouldn't say pastoral support, but it's kind of pastoral, kind of care, and kind of help the people in the choir deal with issues which were impacting on their performances. So it was what was happening in their lives. And this job came up, and it was fabulous. And all of a sudden, on stage singing. I still remember the very first time I sang with the choir, because I decided that if I was going to do this job, you could either do it from sat in front, or you could actually stand on the stage.
And be with them.
There are limitations. When you're stood in a choir, you can't see everybody. You get a feeling for what's happening better than from where you're sitting in front, but you can't see everybody very well. So the very first thing we performed, I think I joined in the September, and we did a concert in St Nicholas's Cathedral for Christmas, for shelter, and I remember being absolutely terrified.
St Nick's being
Cathedral
in Newcastle.
Interesting, my father, as an apprentice electrician, used to change the light bulbs in there on a single ladder.
Oh my God.
Yep, held up. And I don't know how high it is to the top of those light bulbs.
It's quite high.
It's pre-health and safety issues. And so it was quite, and I just never took my eyes off the conductor. Never took my eyes off the conductor. And that was quite good. And one of the consequences of being involved with Streetwise Opera and the choirs was that we made 2 films while I was there.
Brilliant.
And that was a really good experience. Sang in various places. I sang in Covent Garden. You know,
That is fantastic.
I would so like to tell King Cole. Have you ever sung in Covent Garden, Mr. Cole? Sung in the Cathedral. We had film launches in the Institute for Contemporary Art.
Right.
Sung on the South Bank.
Wow.
Just fantastic opportunity.
Wow. Yeah.
Just as part of that job, but almost directly as part of the OU course.
Yes.
Well, I doubt I would have had the confidence to say.
So do you think it was more the confidence that doing the OU gave you rather than the knowledge that the OU, not suggesting that the OU didn't give you knowledge, but did you feel that you were using the knowledge that you got from the OU, or was the confidence of having the knowledge? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yes. I think the two things that came together for this job were the 19 or so years in Manchester,
Right.
where I was running an adult education centre with two other people. So that gave us experience of dealing with the client group. I don't like that phrase particularly, but the client group. And then having studied music and having worked in music in Manchester, I knew what adults were bringing to the table when they wanted to learn, although not singing. But having done the OU with some exposure to opera, I knew some of the storylines and the confidence to work with professional, classically trained musicians, so that I didn't feel like I was completely ignorant about those things. But it was the combination that was like, that job was perfect for the combination of things that I brought to the table, and I did that, and that was really enjoyable. Did that until I got cancer diagnosis, and then had to give it up, largely because I couldn't manage hospital appointments. I didn't know when they would be coming up, and I could have struggled on, but I thought that was unfair.
So what would, I mean, Joanne asked me this and I thought it was wonderful, and I have a horrible feeling I didn't ask her, but Joanne asked me this, what would you say to your younger self who had piano lessons and hated it? If you were there now, what would you say to that younger person?
Interestingly, I had a conversation with my mother before she died about it, and my regret about the piano lessons, and to which the piano incident was
the piano incident.
Yeah.
Screening soon at the Symphony.
Was that if my mother had had the patience to wait, I think I'd have come to music in my early teens, because I love music in my head. Even if I can't is probably, I don't know. I have difficulty pitching a note, and that means that singing along with other people, even if it be on a radio, means that it doesn't sound right to me, because I have difficulty pitching it.
But that's not the same as having musicality, though, isn't it? So that's just to do with singing, potentially.
Yes,
rather than
but if you've been told you're no good, and you have difficulty correcting a perceived, well, it's not a perceived error. You can hear when you're not singing the same as somebody else. You can't tell it. But not having the skills to correct it, which is what I've always missed out on until Streetwise, where again I took the decision to join in. There was no reason for me to join in. Didn't need to. I joined in for the reason being that is the right way to work with people, not to judge them from outside, but to be in with and use the skills that you've developed to help them enjoy their experience on stage. And I mean, we did the anniversary at the Sage, the anniversary of Get Carter.
Yes.
That was at the Sage, and the award for achievement for that film was at the Sage, and we had to do the 3 minutes 17 seconds, I think it was, introduction to the movie, because the movie had a 3-minute trailer right at the beginning, where Michael Caine travels on train from London to, and there was a musical score for that, which we got, and we had to go, and it won't work now because my voice has lost a lot of power because of illness. Ooh, 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 ooh. And there's this pattern of oohs, and it's almost impossible to remember. And it's like, how do we do it? And we practiced and practiced and practiced, and we did this at the launch of the British Television and Theatre Awards at the Sage with this little choir. And it's wonderful. Like, and I'm using all of my life experiences. We're going on to, right, this is going to be tense, right? Before we go and cue to go on stage, don't talk, don't worry, we're going to be fine. We've practiced going on and off. You're all capable of singing here. Just keep calm. And then there's, you can see the wave of adrenaline hitting these, I don't know, 20 people or so. Just keep calm. And you can see them getting edgier and edgier and more excited. Keep calm, don't talk. And it was, some pretty wonderful experiences, really.
Hi guys, well that was awesome. I've learned a lot more about my very good friend. I thought I knew a lot, but I've just learned a whole lot more. And it's so fascinating to me that how we've all come to music, and what I want you to take away from this, and what I hope Malcolm has shown and has talked about, is that it doesn't matter how you've come to music. We are all musicians here, and we have all performed, and we've all had incredible experiences from it. And it's not about where you've come from. It's not about necessarily what grades you've got, what qualifications you've got. What comes out of this a lot, I think, is practice and knowing your instrument, but just having confidence and just doing it and being part of something, and the joy that you can get from that. So I really hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please give it a like. Please like me on Facebook, on YouTube, and on all other places that you find me. Or you can just come up to me sometime and go, like, You guys take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.